Welcome to Season 2 of the Spotlight series. Don't just survive, thrive. Most of us have experienced challenging times in our lives, particularly over the last few months of 2020. The key is how we choose to respond, whether we merely survive or thrive. My name is Nicholas Steele, founder of JJP Talent Solutions, an Australian IT recruitment company. With over 20 years' expertise, I provide insights on how you can transform your career to the next level. The focus of Season 2 is around reinvention and how we can thrive in the new normal. In this podcast, I speak to experts from a variety of professions, including HR, technology, marketing, and business coaching. I don't have all the answers. However, collectively, we can instill hope, clarity, and inspiration. I hope you enjoy listening. I'm delighted to introduce Kylie Denton. Kylie is the founder of Performance Advisory Group. She is a professional coach and leadership expert who specialises in leadership development and sales training to develop high-performing teams in financial services. Kylie is also a speaker and best-selling author. Kylie, thank you for joining me on Season 2, Episode 9 of the Spotlight series, Don't Just Survive, Thrive. So Kylie, tell me a little bit more about you and your background and what you do.
Sure. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Nicola. It's great to be here today. I specialise in working with senior leaders and their sales teams in financial services. So essentially we develop high-performing sales teams that get great results, but importantly make a difference to the lives of their valued clients. You know, financial services is a really complex environment that can be really confusing for employees and costly for the business if it's not managed well. And right now, it's like the perfect storm in financial services. There's never a good time for a pandemic, but this one has really struck at a moment when the industry was already in a period of reconstruction after the Royal Commission. And I find that leaders are facing an unprecedented test on their ability to lead through a crisis. And that's why I truly believe now leaders need to engage, inspire, coach, and empower their people now more than ever.
Absolutely. I mean, not just in financial services, there's been a huge upheaval for everyone and considerable change. So what advice would you give leaders to embed behavioural change successfully?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a question I've actually been asked a lot over the last couple of months. And to be honest, this could take up a whole podcast in a snap, but I'll keep it at a high level. And then if you like, you can just direct the listeners where to find out more. But, you know, for me, you know, humans are creatures of habits and naturally they resist adopting new practices or mindsets or behaviours, you know, and nobody likes that uncertainty of change. Therefore, embedding behaviour change is a difficult challenge, but it becomes even more difficult when it's in a professional work environment. There's 5 key success factors that I consider to be imperative to making behaviour change permanent, okay? And the first one is that you've got to understand and clearly communicate the impact of the behaviour change on the people that's changing. Number 2, you've got to build an emotional case, not just a rational one. You know, often as leaders, we're really good at building rational cases. We have our statistics, we have our facts, we have our figures, and we think that logic alone will convince people and win their support. But for people to join us on that journey and support the changes, they need to really understand the emotional benefits for themselves. And I think even more so now whilst we're going through a pandemic. The third thing is leadership teams need to champion the change. You know, they've got to be there talking about it. They've got to lead that change. 4, I always talk about bringing your people with you. So don't do it to them, do it with them. And then finally, don't just roll it out and dust off your hands. You know, I think a lot of the times when we put a change program in a company, then what happens is we go, right, we'll roll it out. There we go. Well, it's done. Whereas a change is never completed until a habit is formed. So don't dust your hands off too quickly when it comes to this part of it.
Yes, definitely. And like any change, any habits, I think is the timescale normally 30 days. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, well, it depends, but you're right. I've got a background in psych, and we used to always go 21 days for change, but everyone's slightly different. Okay, so they normally say between 21 up to 3 months. So that's a fair while
Wow.
after the program's been implemented to not just let it go.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, where we work has changed and really impacted how leaders communicate with their teams as well. So, what would you say are the warning signs that leadership teams need to really rethink the way that they communicate?
Gosh, it has changed dramatically. I've been running presentations for a group of senior leaders around communication, and what was once a simple process across many mediums now requires much more focus on the human element, and especially during the crisis. We don't even have all of our staff in the offices anymore. So the way in which we communicate has even changed because of the location of our staff. Here are 5 signs that I think leaders need to know, or at least observe, that might indicate that the leadership team needs to rethink the way they communicate. Okay, so here's some of the tips that I think they should really start to look out for. The first one is low morale or engagement. Is there a lack of energy in the office or even at home? This often gives us that clear indication that there's a breakdown in communication. Employees often mimic what they see, and if they aren't observing a collaborative team environment and that great communication, then they're not going to participate either. So first one, low morale and engagement. The second one is uncertainty. And I think at these times, again, no one wants to experience uncertainty in the workplace. So if employees are unsure of their role or even who to ask for help, then this can become exaggerated. Open communication ensures that everyone knows exactly how they're contributing and also what to expect. Number 3 is around lack of collaboration. Often we feel that if we just communicate and we just deliver the message, then the message will be done, but it's really important to collaborate. So are your employees helping each other on projects, and is there a crossover between the teams? Okay, or is there animosity there? While it's healthy for a little competition, at the end of the day, everyone should be willing to help out and lend a hand when needed. Number 4 is around loss of credibility, and this comes when you don't become an engaged listener and communicator. So if your team doesn't approach you or they're effectively steering clear, it's a good sign that the doors of communication are closed. And then finally, high turnover. If their staff are leaving all the time, it's a good indication that we've got some imbalance in the office. It's really never too late to implement effective communication methods in your leadership team. So look at where you are currently at, identify the changes you can make going forward, and get everyone on the same page and get really clear about how, when and why and who you'll communicate with. There's a lot of models around communication. I always talk about one model, which is the 5 W's and the 1 H, which is, the what, the why, the who, the when, the how, and the where. And that's a great model to start for any leaders to work out how they want to communicate.
Fantastic. And communication has always been important, but even now more than ever, and also much kind of trickier as well if we're not all in the same place to do that.
People receive messages differently too, so we can't just use email or we can't just use face-to-face. There's got to be a mix, there's got to be a blend, and there's got to be the opportunity for people to actually send and receive the messages. So that opportunity to talk about what the message is also important.
Absolutely. And messages can be so easily misinterpreted when just read on text rather than face-to-face. And Kylie, you also provide training with regards to emotional intelligence. So why do you think EQ is such an essential characteristic for high-performing leaders?
Yeah, look, my background is in psychology, so I remember learning a lot about emotional intelligence and a lot about IQ throughout my studies. But emotional intelligence is the capacity to be aware of, control and express one's emotions. But it also allows you to handle the interpersonal relationships carefully and and empathetically with others as well. And research has shown since the 1990s is that EQ is far more important than IQ when it comes to future success. So therefore, it goes to show that having a fully developed emotional intelligence is going to be a tool that every leader wants to have in their toolbox. You know, if we take a look at it from a sales perspective, if we understood our clients better, we knew what motivated them and then worked with them, would they want to do business with us? Of course they would. Now let's take a look at it from a leadership or a management position. If we understood our teams better, our members, our goals, their aspirations and their strengths and their weaknesses, could we build a stronger and more cohesive team? Absolutely. So I think it's important to be able to recognize, you know, as a leader, how we are feeling without letting it affect our behaviour. And I'm always talking with leaders about the more you can check in with yourself, the more self-aware you will become. So practice it with your clients, with your teams, even with your friends and your family, and consider how they're feeling and notice their body language. You know, this really builds your own skills around emotional intelligence as well. And we know too that emotional intelligence is a learned skill, whereas IQ isn't. It's just what we're built with. So it's absolutely critical now for leaders to be able to develop that sort of level of leadership as well.
Absolutely. And again, it's all coming back to that communication aspect. And Kylie, you mentioned a few things, but how else can leaders really best practice emotional intelligence?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I said before, it is a learned skill. So there's 4 quadrants when you think about emotional intelligence. The first one is self-awareness. Okay, and this is about learning and being more self-aware of you, how you're feeling, what it is that's going on for you, understanding what happens in your work environment or your relationship. So it's really being able to understand yourself. The second quadrant is around self-management, okay, and that's about being able to have self-control, okay, being able to manage those destructive emotions that might come up, and also, you know, how your readiness to seize opportunities and act. So how are you managing your own self? So there's self-awareness for you, but there's also self-management too. And then another quadrant is social awareness. And this is something I talk to leaders about all the time. You know, how aware are they of what is happening within a room, say, for example? How are they showing empathy? How are they showing that they're understanding others and taking an active interest in their concerns? So social awareness is really how are you engaging with those around you, building decisions, you know, recognizing and meeting customer needs, okay? And then finally, relationship management, which is really about the competency of you being able to build and develop relationships. So these are all learned skills. So it's about more, how do you become more self-aware? How do you develop your self-management? How are you in social situations, and how are you actually managing relationships? So these are all things that leaders can take an opportunity to reflect on, really self-assess themselves, observe the interactions, ask people, okay? There's even some tests that you can go and do online as well, and that'll give you a bit of an indication. It might not be totally right, but if you wanted to go and check it out, you could as well.
Yeah, and I think that's really, I mean, you can do the tests online, and also just, as you say, just asking people their feedback, because what they say might not necessarily be what you think is the case, and be quite surprised how you come across and what have you.
Yeah, you know, social awareness, you know, think about it like when you walk into a meeting, you know, and you're sitting down and there might be 10 other people in the room, you know, taking the opportunity to stop and go, what are other people in the room feeling? What am I noticing? How are they interacting with others? You know, what's their body language like? You know, so you can start to use that within work. Okay, you could do it even in social settings as well, when you go to a barbecue or something like that, you know. So they're just little tips that you can actually develop yourself in order to build these skills.
Definitely. And Kylie, we've got managers, we've got leaders. You're talking a lot about leaders at the moment. What do you think is the key difference between a manager and a leader?
Yeah. Look, I do. I work with leaders and I work with managers, and there is definitely a big difference for sure. What I want to talk about is, I think, around what makes a great leader. You know, that inspirational leader. And then your listeners will know some areas that they can learn and develop their skills to becoming an inspiring leader and a leader that makes a difference and gets results. And I think when you're looking at the difference between a leader and a manager, it also allows you to kind of understand where you might be sitting as well. You know, so for me, the number one thing a leader does, an inspirational leader does, is they engage with their people. They build relationship. Inspiring leaders don't just get results for the company. They foster growth and development of their employees. They invest their time, attention, and resources in helping their people to achieve their potential. You know, whereas leaders might be more focused on more results for the company. Okay, whereas that the inspirational leaders is, we know that if we engage our people, we get more from them, which means we get better results. Number two, I think, is inspirational leaders make the people around them want to be better. Okay, and you might have experienced this in your career as well, where you just had a leader that just knew that you had so much more to give. You know, they motivate. To get you to achieve greater goals. They're positive, they're optimistic, they build trust with their people. They help their team members see the big picture beyond work, you know, and that, I think, is the difference between a leader and a manager.
Absolutely. They're the ones that you remember from 15 plus years ago that made a real impact on the person you are today.
And then we've got I think leaders, inspirational leaders, also empower their team. You know, we hire people because they can do a job, but the inspirational leaders go further than this. They encourage and support their team to grow, you know, even if that growth takes them beyond the company. So inspirational leaders don't see themselves as just a boss or a manager, but they see themselves as a mentor. They actively want their team to succeed, and they want to celebrate the small things along the way. Another one that I always talk about with the difference between a leader and a manager is inspirational leaders coach their people. You know, they want to help their staff to grow and develop. They know that just like an athlete, they need the guidance of a coach. So to do this, your team needs you to coach, develop them, support them, and grow them. And then finally, I think another great point is that leaders reach out and they ask for help. The final way to open the doors of communication is not to be afraid to reach out. Strong leaders are those that are able to have the courage to ask for help. And, you know, that is absolutely critical, because as a leader, we don't know it all. We've still got so much to learn. I had a senior leader the other day show his staff his to-do list because he was feeling so overwhelmed, and he wanted to share it with his staff to see what parts they could help him with. And I just found that a moment of vulnerability for him, okay, and something that he actually just thought, you know what, I don't have to do it all myself. I can reach out to my team. So I loved it. Look, I could talk all day about this sort of stuff, but I'll stop there. They're probably my top 5.
They're fantastic. And I think I really like that vulnerability aspect at the end.
Yeah.
That obviously you've got to have strength, but being vulnerable, that particular leader would have found help for himself by talking to his team, but also the team members will feel encouraged, I think, by his vulnerability as well, that he isn't totally unstoppable, that he is a human being as well.
Yeah, we've got to ask for help. And you know what? When we do, people give it.
Yes. And that's something I've noticed, particularly during this crisis over the last few months, even more so. People are willing to help if you ask. And at the moment, our minds are full of worry, uncertainty, stress, which often impacts our ability to think, prioritize, be productive. And I read a post of yours recently about a simple tool that enables you to prioritize and organize tasks much more effectively. So tell me a little bit more about this secret tool of yours.
Sure. So was that the Eisenhower Matrix that I talked about?
Absolutely. That's the one. Yes.
I tell you what, it got a lot of feedback. I think people really, and what I've found, especially since COVID hit, is that our minds are so full. Okay, there's so many things. That's not just work that we're worrying about. It's also our family and our friends and all of the other things that go with that. Okay, and I brought this tool out that I've used as a leader for many years, and I brought this tool out and I presented this tool to over 400 leaders to allow them to start to prioritise what needed to be done rather than having so many thoughts run through their mind. And then I wrote a blog on it as well. So the Eisenhower Matrix is a method for prioritising tasks on the basis of their urgency. So it really helps to determine the activities which are important and the ones which do not deserve your time or attention, okay? And the brainchild behind the Eisenhower Matrix was Dwight Eisenhower, and he was one of the US presidents. I think he was number 34. But what these 4 quadrants of the Eisenhower Matrix is made up of is the do, the decide, the delegate, and the eliminate. So the do is all about, making sure you're doing the important and the urgent tasks. Okay, and making sure that they are focused on and they are done. The second quadrant is the decide, okay, and this is really deciding about, is it necessarily to do it now or could it wait a week? And they could be scheduled for some other time. So generally these tasks are in line more with your long-term goals. And then we've got 3, delegate. Not very many people are very good at delegating. Okay, they like to hold on to it. If I keep it and do it myself, I'll get it. It'll be done right the first time. But it's really important that we delegate. And this category refers to tasks which are not important, but they're urgent. So it sounds counterintuitive because naturally your first instinct would be, well, they aren't tasks which are not urgent but are important. So how does that work? But what we need to consider here is, how do I delegate something to someone else in order to free up my time so that I can spend time on more of the urgent and the important tasks? So people need to get better at that part of it and really look at it objectively as opposed to subjectively. And the final one is eliminate. And these consist of tasks that are essentially your productivity killers. Okay, we know this because we've learned a lot about this, haven't we, Nicola, around are the things that you're doing contributing towards your goals? Okay, I know so many people that might spend hours on emails, or they might be doing things that they find easy to do because it's taking them away from the things that they should be doing, the urgent or important tasks. So the eliminate is really making sure that you try and remove what you can do, whether you outsource it or you get someone within the team to do it, or however you do it, is important. But honestly, the Eisenhower Matrix is absolutely a perfect tool for leaders. They should use it every single week and really focus on how they should be prioritising their work.
Absolutely. And I must say, I find the most difficult ones out of those 4, the delegate and the eliminate.
Yeah.
So very much a work in progress. But thank you very much for that, Kylie.
Yeah.
I think that's really useful. And actually, you mentioned about the leader and his to-do list.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I love a nice to-do list. That any sense of overwhelm, get me a pen and a piece of paper, and that just calms me down. And gives focus.
It does, but you know what also happens, and I just got off a coaching session that I had this morning, is I have a guy that writes lists. I'm a list writer as well, so I'm not going to go too hard on myself here, but he writes his list, okay, and there might be 20 things on there, and he will go so hard to complete all of those 20 things, okay? What I'm saying in this stage is, write your list, but then look at your Eisenhower Matrix and determine where those 20 things sit in those 4 quadrants, okay? So that you get really clear on what you should be working on and what you should be delegating or eliminating. So it's great to have a list, but you've got to back it up with that Eisenhower Matrix.
That's a brilliant idea. I shall implement that with my next list. I shall be dividing the piece of paper into 4.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And Kylie, you're also a published author. Congratulations. So tell me a little bit more about your book.
Sure. Look, I had an amazing opportunity to co-author a special lockdown edition for Fit for Purpose leadership during COVID, okay? And this was an opportunity for a group of amazing leaders that came together to talk about how we need to lead or how we should be leading through a crisis like this. And it talked about lots of different areas, but one of the things that I really spoke about was about the qualities that leaders need to use right now. Right now, even if we're not in lockdown like some other states or other countries, right now as a leader, what do your people need from you? And I talked about qualities such as the ability to remain calm, the ability to be confident, okay, even when you don't feel confident. And many of us don't feel confident with that. At the moment, we don't know. There's so much unknown. The collaboration, how important it is to collaborate, okay? We've already got so many things on our mind. We really should be looking to collaborate with others and working with others, because more brains and more thoughts and more ideas are generated that way. Sometimes as leaders, we feel that we have to know all the answers, but when we collaborate with others, we get the answers faster. And in fact, they could probably be better answers than what you had as well. And empathy and understanding. There really is this human element that needs to be focused on from a leader around COVID or around a lockdown like this. And in fact, when we did the live interviews for this, every single leader that wrote, that helped co-author this book, said the human element, the human touch, the empathy and understanding was absolutely key. So look, I felt very excited and loved the opportunity to write a book for leaders that they could use right now at a time when they probably needed it more than ever before. And then last December, I had an opportunity to co-author a book on sales. And one of the big parts of my business as well is helping sales teams in financial services to become really high-performing sales teams. And I had an opportunity to co-author this book with other amazing top sales professionals, and we shared our best thinking on branding, lead generation, marketing, sales, winning more customers and having more valuable, meaningful conversations. So I feel really lucky to have done both of those. And both the books are on Amazon and in either a Kindle version or a hard copy, which is amazing as well. So you can get it straight away.
That's fantastic. Well, what I'll do is I'll share those links to Amazon on the show notes.
Oh, perfect. Yes, great idea.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for sharing your insights, Kylie. Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
Look, I think considering we're in a moment of unprecedented times around leaders, is for me, just as a leader, be kind to yourself. Give yourself grace. We're all going through such a tough time, but reach out, speak to your staff, work with your teams, collaborate more, develop empathy, and, go out there and lead the troops to victory, because, this is a time in history, whereas when you are a leader, you will be remembered for your leadership skills right now.
That's brilliant. Well, thank you very much for that, Kylie. And I know it sounds a little bit cliched, but as you say, we're all in this together, and it's a time to really stand out and make a difference. Thank you.
Absolutely agree. My pleasure. I've loved talking to you today, Nicola.
I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review. If you're looking for career advice, your next career opportunity, or to grow your tech team, then please call me, Nicola Steele, on 0499 773 546, or go to our website, jjptalent.com.au. The Don't Just Survive, Thrive podcast is part of the Spotlight series, which includes the YouTube channel, Spotlight on Software Development. If you want more insights into the software industry, particularly tech startups, then subscribe to the Spotlight on Software Development YouTube channel. Thank you for listening. Until next time.